Amazing. So, take three, welcome to our Instagram Live today, where we're going to be doing a review of a Netflix TV series called Encounters, which is about alien encounters. And I actually haven't watched the whole series. I've only watched episode 2 because that one is about my father-in-law, John Mack, who substantiated the claims of experiencers by sitting down and listening to them and then psychoanalyzing them, concluding through his usual scientific analyses that these people were sane, functional, that their trauma response was real. And so he said to the world, hey, why don't we just listen to these people, because something real is happening in their bodies and there could be some truth to this. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who may have seen it, you might notice my husband and John Mack walk very those parts kind of crack me up. They have similar mannerisms.
They sound
super, right?
Yeah. I started watching and I was like, whoa, Danny.
I know, it's so cute. So there's a few things that I just wanted to say as we open up today, where I wanted to talk about John Mack. He was a Harvard tenured professor who, his major work was in psychiatry, and he actually did a lot, and he won the Pulitzer Prize in the 70s for his biography. It was like this huge biography of Lawrence of Arabia, where he actually went out there and, traveled his footsteps and studied him and examined like why, did this, white man go into an Arab country and decide to lead the Arabs, and, like the whole psychology of all of that. And so pretty fascinating work. And very respected at Harvard until the 90s, where he started to have experiencers come to him in his practice who were talking about experiencing aliens or even being abducted, and decided, well, something in them, what they're talking about seems really real. So let's examine this, right? So he started these people and started to put together bodies of work and wrote a few pieces. He wrote that first book. Oh goodness, where did that go? Of course,
His books were good.
But he wrote one book, I think it's called Experiencers or something like that. But his second book, which I want to kind of point out, is called Passport to the Cosmos. And for anybody who has spent any time at Boulder Psychic Institute in the building, they may have seen this book floating around because we have a bunch of copies. But his first book about experiencers kind of talks more of his, this one is a one, if anyone gets it, it's called Passport to the Cosmos. And he actually talks about the messages that people were receiving from the aliens, and how if maybe we just listen to these people, we might kind of get our passport to the cosmos, like a little bit of a gateway into the fact that very possibly, in quite my opinion, the universe is a lot bigger than planet Earth, and there's a lot more happening out there than we can contemplate, or than some people are even willing to imagine. And so this book is all about the messages that came through to people. If you watched episode 2, the big message that alien gave to the children was about technology and how it's moving too fast and it's not going to turn out well for humans. And I think that what's it been 30 years later, we might all be recognizing that there might be some truth in that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that popped out to me when I was watching that was that John Mack was just kind and respectful to the kids. Like, he just talked to them like they were not stupid or bad or made it up. And because it seems like there was 60-some kids, and every single one of them got told after that, no, you didn't see that, don't talk about it, don't, hush. that didn't happen, which is very damaging, because something happened, even if it was, who knows, but something affected all 60 of those kids in a real way. And just saying, hush, be quiet, is like, that's not helpful. So like he came around and validated them, and it shows the importance of validation, of just not saying you're right or not, just like, yes, I see what happened to you and I see why it matters, and it was sweet, it was really touching. But the message of the aliens, I found that the other thing that really popped out at me was, that's a lot to lay on a bunch of kids. Like, hey, alien, these are 10-year-olds? I don't know. In the middle of Zimbabwe in 1994, what exactly did you think they're supposed to do? So then these kids have this huge burden of, I'm supposed to save the environment. So I wonder if you spoke to them about that. I don't know, the weight of that assignment that they got, which was fascinating.
Yeah, that wasn't really John Mack's style. He was more, coming in his clinical view of, I'm going to just come in and ask questions and not put any ideas into their heads, not make any suggestions, and really do it from a neutral place so that I can substantiate, their claims or their evidence if there is some truth in it, right? And so I have not heard any, discussion about him, asking like, why would they come to these kids? I mean, I think that kind of raises the bigger question of, if there are aliens among us, why are they choosing the people that they're choosing to interact with, right?
Right.
And yeah. Right? Why some people and not others? Because I know you really want to have an experience.
No, I mean, I want to see like a fairy or something. Like, I don't know about it. Like, I listened to this podcast. I binge listened to this podcast about aliens and artists, and how people that have encounters often start creating really wild work. And some of the stories are so like waking up in an alien sitting at the foot of your bed, and I'm like, hard pass, no, no. But I don't always know what I think about aliens. Like, it makes sense, and so many experiences or stories I hear, these people want to be anonymous. They're not trying to get any money or attention, and like, why would they make all this up? And a lot of times it's really wreaked havoc on their life, their perception of reality, nobody believing them. And these kids, like, I think a lot of them struggled after that, of like, yeah, nobody believed me. And then I've watched the environment get worse. And the self-trust they must have with themselves, getting like, am I crazy? Am I not? It'd be so interesting. And yeah, the aliens, like, why are you guys talking to a bunch of kids? Or was that an accident? Like, it's like, don't you get the idea that it was like, oops, oh, hey, kids, the environment is important, too much technology, there's this thing called cell phones and AI that's coming, you don't want that, and these kids are just like, okay. I mean, like, do aliens screw up? That kind of brings up like the higher power.
I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is that this was in 1994, before internet was really a thing. I remember I got my first dial-up AOL computer system. I think it was in 1994 or 1995. And I mean, and so in Zimbabwe, I can't imagine that there were just computers or internet everywhere for people to be dialoguing about these things. And on top of it, in the 90s, there wasn't much dialogue about the environment, much less technology. So, this message to me is pretty fascinating, how relevant it is even 30 years later.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to that question of, why do aliens choose the people they do? And especially in this case, why would they choose a bunch of children and potentially create emotional and social difficulties for people's lives as they're growing up? Because, it's pretty obvious that they're going to be extremely invalidated. And where I go with that is just, isn't it so amazing, the paradox of us as humans, and especially in our civilized societies, where we want to believe that we're the only beings in the universe. It's only us, Earth. It's just Earth. That's it. There's nothing else outside of here. We end at the edge of our atmosphere. That's it. Nothing else. And what a narcissistic viewpoint to believe that there's only us in this whole massive, ginormous universe. That does it have an end? Where is the end of the universe? And then on top of it, there's other universes. There's other galaxies. There's so much out there. And so, believing that it's just us, to me, is a bit adolescent of a viewpoint, maybe a bit, narcissistic of a viewpoint. And then on top of it, what I also find really amusing is that the other end of the paradox is, as humans, when we do want to believe in something outside of the earthly realm, we want to put it on a pedestal, right? We want to put God on a pedestal. We want to put angels on a pedestal. We want to put entity on a pedestal. We want to put aliens on a pedestal. And so somewhere in there, we have projected, for those that do believe in aliens or even have an inkling of belief in aliens, that, oh, well, because they're aliens, they're so much better than us. And so they must be all-knowing and omniscient. So why the F would they choose these young kids, or why do they choose the people that they do choose? Why don't they choose somebody more credible? Why don't they go talk to, I don't know, Oprah or Matthew McConaughey, who's got a bigger platform to talk about these things? And my response to that is, beings perfect. They probably have some flaws, just like us as human beings. We want to put people like, Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Jesus on a pedestal, and they were still humans who had very much human experiences that made mistakes. Right. And my read on that situation, if you listen to those children, when the ships landed, it looked like there were a bunch of beings kind of moving around like ants. So the ship might have landed in the wrong place, like oops, and everybody's scrambling, and then there's this one random gray who was like, there's all these kids staring at us. Hey, I want to go have a conversation with them, and who knows what happened to that alien? Like, he might have been reprimanded by his officer for talking to kids, you lost your winging it privileges, like he might have gotten, we don't know. Yeah, right. So
yeah, that was my thing.
Yeah. What did you say? You kind of cut out.
Well, that was my sense, was like, was this intentional? Or maybe let's say those are aliens, maybe they don't know that, like, oh, the littler humans, they don't have the same, they're different than the bigger humans. Maybe they don't even know that what's a kid, what's an adult. But perhaps, and I think someone just said this in the comments, like,
they were.
Uh-oh. I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think we're talking at the same time, but there's a delay. Kids maybe are more perceptive and open and more psychic, and so the aliens were like, hey, these littler humans can see us. I don't know,
and there could have been a bigger plan there. Like, oh, wow, these kids are going to speak from a lot of authenticity. John Mack got some great footage. He brought a professional team down to record these scenes in, 1994. And, they got some amazing shots of these kids, and they just look so sincere and so real. I mean, when you're watching it, it's actually quite touching to see, like, oh, these kids are, there's something. I mean, you don't even have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or trained in these things to kind of see, like, whoa, there's something going on there, and it's pretty sincere, and it's pretty touching to see how John Mack could get them to talk about it and open up about it. And so, yeah, who knows also, maybe there was a bigger plan. We talked to these kids in 30 years, this stuff is going to become more accepted by the human species. And maybe then that message will be able to be heard. And there might be people like us saying, yeah, this was 94. Nobody was worried about the environment or even talking about it. So how did these little young children, who didn't even know what the word technology was, get this amazing message that's actually extremely relevant today, right? And maybe there was a bigger plan to do. Who knows? But these aliens that these kids experienced are what people in the alien community would call the grays, right? The grays. And my husband and I were talking about this last night, about how John would interview people who had experiences with the grays, and they were almost like super ethereal and super illuminated. And so even like the drawings that the kids did, or a lot of the drawings that you see where these grays are depicted and they look like our human bodies, like and not necessarily as illuminated as people describe them. It's hard to really depict that, but the grays seems that interact with humans more than maybe the reptilian aliens or the Pleiadians, or there's not just the grays either, right? We actually had somebody email me with a question of why are a lot of the experiencers' stories, whether it's these kids or other ones, why do they always see like the round spaceship and those aliens with the grays is what they call them, very illuminated, shorter than humans, big heads, and ginormous black eyes, right? And I just my read on that is that that they're a little bit more of an advanced alien species, and so they're able to come and visit a little bit more.
Well, I know, like, how weird is that? There's like multiple different kinds of aliens. And how weird is it that we believe in we believe in God? There's people fighting wars over their God, what their God told them, and angels and saints. But this belief makes you crazy in aliens. And like you and I talked about this yesterday, or what does crazy mean? Even your father-in-law, John Mack, saying these, people are saying, what belief makes you crazy and what belief makes you enlightened? Does that make sense?
Right? Yeah, because depending on what part of the world you're in the West, we might call somebody crazy, and in certain other parts of the world, they might be a guru who's sitting, doing lectures and healing people. So when I sit back and look at the energy of crazy as a psychic, because as a psychic, I've been called crazy a lot. It's a pretty regular occurrence for me.
There's the word and then the word psycho, and they're really close.
They're very close, and yeah, that's very true. And I oftentimes say that there's a very fine between being psychic and psycho, and the fine line is the energy of needing to prove it. I call it prove it energy. So what gets you into medical situation, or even it takes these experiences. It's psychic experiencing an alien, or just what those normal people might call the paranormal, right? What lands you in a medicated or a hospitalized type situation is the need to prove it. No, it's real, screaming from the rooftops. And this is where I see that those experiencers are smart, obviously well-adjusted human beings who go, oh, if I talk about this too much and I try to prove it to people who don't believe, who are very in the paradigm, and I would call it the government and maybe even religious paradigm of, no, this isn't real. Shh. We want to keep the mass hysteria down because they're projecting that we as humans can't handle an understanding that there's something outside of planet Earth, right? And so when they experience or interact with those people, they're smart. to say, oh, I'm just not really going to talk about it. And this is where, you mentioned that a lot of these experiencers, they're not trying to get attention. They're not, shouting from rooftops, and I would say that's a well-adjusted human being who has their first chakra and their lower chakras in order. Community going to affect my physical well-being if I talk about this too much. So I'm not going to put that prove it energy out there to the world. And this is a lot how I approach my work too, which is, if y'all are interested, here I am, but I'm not going to push my beliefs on you. I'm not going to, kind of be a born again psychic who's like, no, this is so amazing. You have to believe in entities and energy and auras and chakras and right. And, we talk about entities.
I mean, sometimes,
right? And there's
students,
all sorts of.
Yeah. When I have calls with students and they'll say like, well, there's this one thing Miwa said, or I learned her Dave or whoever, and I don't know about that. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. You don't have to believe that. If that doesn't resonate with you, big whoop. And I was like, yeah, this is not a religion. This is not a set of dogma here. But it kind of surprises people, and it's like, all right, it's cool if you don't believe that. But I think as humans, we like to have a super solid set of beliefs. It's a sort of a safe place. Which, why I'm curious what you think about. Do you think that it's going to shift, like up until today? I mean, it just seems like if you talk about aliens, you're like part of this fringe group. People roll their eyes. It's embarrassing. Like, Harvard was embarrassed by John Mack. And do you think that's shifting at all? Do you think it's going to shift in the next few years? I mean, the government is now saying there's a bunch of stuff that happens that we cannot explain. Yeah. So do you think it's going to be more?
There's a delay waiting for you to wrap up.
I'm done.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to do the sign. Like, no, after what? The one thing that I was going to get to with regards to the grays is, on a psychic level, I interact with all sorts of, so there's various entities from all over that I interact with on the astral plane via my astral body while I'm astral traveling. And so, somebody just asked, well, what? I've never with an alien, but I've had lots of encounters with alien entities. And so there's aliens, if you will, from lots of various planets, and I interact with them on a spiritual level. And so to acknowledge that there's going to very possibly, for those who have experienced aliens, that there's going to be different types of aliens that will come and interact with us. But with regards to people's belief shifting about anything paranormal, the shift has been happening. I started teaching this work in 2003, and my new students, I had to spell chakra. Here's how you spell chakra. Here's what a chakra means. Here's what it looks like. Here's where the 7 chakras are in your body. And now in my beginners classes, I was like, okay, y'all know about chakras. And so let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics of chakras. So I can skip that whole intro now and just jump to these topics without having to kind of the more levels of details, because most people, when you say chakra or aura, they already have an idea as to what that means. And so the world of the paranormal has definitely been expanding, especially with how quickly the world is changing and the levels of difficulty and strife we have. Our politics are pretty intense these days. We have wars. We just got out of a global pandemic where there were extreme restrictions that were placed on us, and our social IQ has significantly decreased, right? And a lot's been happening, and I think as things are speeding up because of technology, more and more people are wanting to look outside of the traditional norm, the traditional viewpoints, and they're wanting to find answers that maybe are more expansive. And so I do see that, people are gonna, and they already are. I mean, if you look at the Netflix show, it's pretty popular. It's like number in the top 10 watched shows right now. And it's because people are wanting answers that are bigger than our government or our pastors or our regular normal leaders can give us. And so, if you will, Ralph Blumenthal, he was the guy at the very beginning, the older gentleman who was talking about John Mack. He actually was, and he was a New York Times investigative reporter, and he got a Pulitzer Prize on his investigative work on the 1993 truck bombing of the New York Trade Center. So, I mean, he's an extremely credible investigative journalist who just recently uncovered that there is that the U.S. Department of Defense has a secret program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which is basically all about UFOs. And so he has a book coming out in 2023, this year, maybe next year, on, you know, uncovering and his investigative reports on how the government, you know, knows that there's aliens and that they're, you know, they've actually recovered alien spacecraft. But anyway, he wrote this book called The Believer, and he did extensive interviews of everyone in John Mack's life, including my husband. So if you want to read more about John Mack, you can read The Believer here. There's some really cute pictures of my husband when he was a little baby. He was born in Japan. Oh. And there's my husband right there in John Mack. You can see John Mack was an extremely handsome man. So was his mom. And then the other thing that I do want to say is, for those of you who are wanting more of an in-depth movie to watch on these experiencers, Randall Nickerson, we call him Randy, he actually purchased the rights to John Mack's work a long time ago to produce a film, and where he actually came up with the original idea of interviewing these experiencers, these children 30 years later, and talking to them and following their lives. And he actually does a whole movie on it. You guys can check it out at the Ariel, I think it's arielphenomenon.com. And that's the name of the movie, that's the name of the website. And he actually tracks one of the experiencers named Emily, and talks, you know, about like more of her life and how that affected her, and
I think I've
how
heard
just
an interview with her.
being
Sorry,
very, how that really shut her down as she was growing up, right? And this is where we never really circled back around to crazy, right? On a psychic energy level, when somebody calls you crazy, and this is why it just doesn't bother me anymore. So for any of you guys watching, whether you're an experiencer or a psychic or both, I do know that some of my students have had experiences. And what somebody calls you saying is, my reality and the way I perceive reality, how you're talking about reality and your perspective of reality. So perspectives don't go crazy, right? And we tend to socially call those who are crazy the ones whose perspectives don't align with the norm. But then this is where I also just have to talk about norm. Like, what's normal? Like, let's distinguish between normal and natural.
Right. I mean, because often the entire group,
go ahead.
I mean, sometimes the entire group will be doing something really nuts, like, oh, slavery's fine. And the majority of all the white people are like, yep. And then people go against that and they go, oh, you're crazy. So, yeah, right. Which one is right? The individual or the group? That, you know, that gets really dicey. But
yeah,
go
right.
ahead.
Let you like you went to slavery, right? And then the people who are called crazy were on the right side of history because they said, no, this is really bad, let's not do this. But those people, right, and this is what I want to distinguish, is the difference between natural and normal. Those people were not following the norm. They were tuning in to what was natural inside of them. Their natural human instinct was like, whoa, we don't treat other human beings like this, even if they look different than us, right? And same thing, psychic and paranormal phenomenon, it's built into our human design, our genetics, to be psychic, to be able to see energy. You see it in little children who have very natural, natural experiences with entities or the other side or the other world. And it's in there, and that's what's very natural. So, what's normal? I don't know. Let's go countercultural here. And let's start to validate what's more natural within us. And I think what John Mack was doing was he was, really seeing the nature of those children, and they were being seen, right? Because what happens when somebody invalidates you like that, we all have this experience, whether you're a child and you tell your mom about something and she says, don't talk about that, or that's not real, or you get a whole group of adults telling these alien experiencing children that didn't happen, and they get this wave of invalidation. What happens is it severe person's light, especially with those experiencers in Zimbabwe. It dims their light, and it dims their ability to access their truth and access what's really natural within them, what's natural, right? And unfortunately, we have a big mass society in our civilized society. I always say that when I see civilized, because I don't know if we're doing it right. But there's a whole bunch of people who are conditioned out of tuning into what's natural, tuning into their light. And so when these kids say, oh, we saw an alien and they told us, the environment it's not going to be good for humans if we let technology grow too fast. These other people who have already been so conditioned to dim their light and not tune into what's natural and to be normal, it triggers them because they go, oh my goodness, you're so bright, you're so illuminated, you're so tuned in with yourself. That breaks apart my ego and how I believe, my perspective of how I think the world should be. No, you're crazy, don't talk about that, that didn't happen. And let me just put all of these levels where I got invalidated and my light is now dim and I can't tune into my true nature. I'm going to put that on you too, because you're freaking me out, right? And that's what happened with these kids, is they got, in more normal terms, they got projected onto. But the mechanics there is all the adults around them were just put into fear because, whoa, there's, these kids are illuminated. They're very activated, and that challenges my reality.
What's your, I'm raising my hand. What's your, I have two questions. One, and one of them was in the chat here. The guy in the show that was like, no, didn't happen. These are all a bunch of dumbasses. None of this happened. All these people are lying. One, what's your read on that guy? And two, my other question is esoteric, and you can answer it or not. It's like, do you think there's people that are like sort of aliens? Like, are some of us hybrids? Do they know they are?
Yes. All right. Yeah, I love those questions. So, when my husband and I were watching episode 2 of Encounters, my husband had to pause. He's like, I've never heard of this guy. He wasn't in my husband's my father-in-law's John Mack's work. He wasn't. There were no documents about him. There was no information around him. He definitely wasn't interviewed, and so we, definitely had a little bit of a dialogue of like, wow, where did this guy come from out of the? And I can imagine, hopefully, that Netflix would do their research, and maybe he did go to school there, but he wasn't one of the 60 school children that raised their hand and wanted to be interviewed, or that said that they were even there on that day. So that's the data that I have on that. My father-in-law had 2 storage units full of file folder boxes, just stacked to the brim of all of his life's work. And we actually just sent his earlier year's work off to the archives at Harvard, and then we sent his later years work to Rice University, which is in Houston, to it's called the Archives of the Impossible. And we sent them there because they weren't going to seal off certain aspects of John Mack's work, because Harvard wanted to seal off the court case and all of the data around that. And so we split up his work and, sent one storage unit worth of boxes and tape recordings and all of his work over to Rice University. And actually I can't remember, I think the director of that program is taking a sabbatical so that he can finish up John Mack's last book that John just wrote before he passed in 94. And it's all about the Harvard court case. So that's going to get edited and produced and published here in the next little bit. So there's that. That was the question about that guy. My psychic read on him is that his aura was pretty choppy. And so oftentimes as a psychic, when a person's aura bounces and has a lot of static to it, that's how I can tell if somebody's in a lie. Now, I've learned through my years of being a psychic not to assume that everyone knows that they're lying. Oftentimes people don't even realize that they're in a lie. So there's something going on with him. And definitely as I was watching him, I thought to myself, like, who are you trying to prove this to, me or you? Because there's just so much charge as he's trying to talk about his side of the story. So that's my comment about him. What, cutie?
That could have been what his brain did to keep him safe. Is, you know what? Yeah. No, I can't deal. And so he's like, his brain just said, override, delete. That was too dramatic and too weird. Bye. And that's his reality.
Yeah. And what I was talking about there, where you get so flooded by invalidation that it dims your light and it disables your ability to access your truth or what's not you. And the human brain is amazingly capable at helping us to block out traumatic experiences so that, or to remember things. I think a study just recently came out about how our memories are not as accurate as we think. Because we have this associative brain where it associates to various things when it's stored. Definitely question all ends, because what we teach here at Boulder Psychic Institute is more about learn how to find your truth, read energy, open up your psychic ability so that you can start to see what's true for you. And, that's true for him. And that's, I agree. I think that his brain did some things to help him reconcile and to be able to be in the world. But you also look at him and it doesn't look like, I'm just going to be real. He doesn't look that well adjusted. Somewhere in there, that trauma is in his body. And it needs to be dealt with if he wants to be more comfortable in his body and to be able to access his true nature, his true spirit, his light. Yeah.
After the
and then your question.
My next question. Oh yeah. Well, I also want to talk about like the idea of mass hysteria. But first, I asked you about like alien hybrids. Is that a thing? That's more fun.
Oh yeah, right? Because a bunch of people emailed me with some questions, and one question was, what's with the head teacher being abducted? And so the headmistress, or I think she was a teacher. I don't think she was a head mistress, but she was on the playground, and she did see those aliens, but she didn't want to talk about it. And you could see where John Mack asked her about it, and she said, I don't want to talk about it or I'm going to have nightmares. And that was as far as John Mack got with her on that interview, because again, she just knew, if I talk about this, I'm going to get ousted in my community, and this is just not going to turn out well for me in my survival. So she definitely kept that to herself.
Yeah.
With regards to hybrids, my psychic perspective, or the way I see this all working, is here on planet Earth, we have young souls, medium souls, and old souls. And generally speaking, what I mean by that is that a young soul is fairly new to the planet. So I was saying that how we have entities, spirits that I interact with that are from other planets. And at some point, they decide they're going to incarnate into planet Earth in a human body. And oftentimes, younger souls will still have a lot of energy in the previous planet that they were on, or in that previous experience, and they'll bring that through. And that's why younger souls will be a little bit more awkward. They'll kind of be like, what is this thing that we're doing here on Earth? Like, what's this body? It's weird. Why do I have to feed it, you know? And the younger souls will have kind of what I might call a lot of alien energy in them. And so those younger souls are fairly new to the planet, and they still have levels of connections with those planets. And if you will, it looked like, you know, and I kind of feel bad talking about that teacher without her present, but if you hear this, you know, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about this. But it looked like, you know, she was a fairly new soul who still had connections with her previous planet, with the Greys, and they were just coming back to visit her and say, are you sure you don't want to come back? You know, do you really want to stay here? You know, and she decided in her conviction, no, I want to stay here. I chose planet Earth, and this is where I'm going to stay in my human body, in my human form in this lifetime. You know, which I actually see that as a very, you know, her being tuned into her natural choice. Like, yeah, no, this is part of my soul path, is to be on planet Earth at this time, in this day and age, with all these levels of amazing experiences, positive and negative, that I can have on Earth in the human body. So, yeah, sometimes I do see people with bodies, and I'm like, oh, you're such a young soul. And yeah, you still have like the alien past life vibe that's coming through.
So it's the energy of that, but not,
yeah, right.
Like, it's not like they take a 23andMe swab and are like, oh, you're 27% gray or reptilian. Like, you know, it's you're like, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. I'm not gonna share that with anybody. But it's the energy of
in my physical. In my physical body, I've never experienced a physical alien. I have experienced alien entities, so I can really only speak to my awareness and my experience levels. So yeah, and I don't know if there would be a DNA for that, or if we even have the technology to test that yet. But wouldn't that be cool?
Find all your cousins.
Yeah. Get to have an alien reunion.
I can't believe I was saying that my family was weird before this moment. Oh yeah, but the other thing that really kept coming to my mind when I was watching this is there are times where I don't think we call it mass hysteria anymore. Maybe there's a more current term for it, where a group of people get convinced that something's happening and it didn't happen. And could case, like, how do you speak to that? Like, could there have been some kind of, it's like a contagious experience between the kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that telephone game, right? Where you have one person say something into a person's ear, and by the time it goes around 20 or 30 people, the story has changed or adjusted. And this is where, you know, our human design is amazing and brilliant in that it will, we have these associative brains where we associate to things. And if you look at the mechanics of how our memory gets stored in the first chakra, and levels of protection to keep that first chakra, which the first chakra is all about your physical integrity and your ability to keep your body healthy and alive. And there are filters on that chakra designed to help the body stay in integrity. And so sometimes those filters get covered up and overlay on a memory or associate it to different type of memory to be able to maintain the integrity of that body, to keep the body alive. You have to remember that any conscious being, the main operative in that system is survive, right? I want to survive, to live, right? And so you have to remember that that's the base vibration. And sometimes the body and its intelligence will cover things up or adjust things so that that survival will stay in there. Now, with regards to and, you know, could it be that, you know, that one guy said there's an alien and then all the kids believe them? I mean, yeah, that probably, I mean, it could possibly be true. You know, you do hear of where, you know, one person says they see something and then somebody else kind of thinks that they saw it. Yeah. But I think that's what John Mack was going down there to check out. Like, did this really happen or not?
It seems like it would have fallen apart after a while. You know, where one kid's like, oh, I saw a giant balloon character. I saw, you know, my toy doll, but it was 7 feet tall. You know, like, I think the stories started crumbling apart.
Because if you think about it, like, what was their alien movie back then? E.T., right? And E.T. was more reptilian looking. You know, if those kids were really associating to something that they had already seen on TV or in the movies or had some visual experience with, I think it would have been more of an ET type being. That's what they probably would have been drawing.
I mean, I believe that our storytellers are often channeling information. So what is in the movies maybe more real than we think, or, you know, is bringing in more information from other places that isn't just imaginary, if you know what I mean. That's a
yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, the human collective is pretty amazing. You know, I mean, people. I mean, whether people are really had alien experiences before the internet, before even telephone, right? Their experiences and the way they talk about them are very much the same. But if you look at also kind of like the connective network of all humans and us as a human species here on planet Earth, I mean, amazing inventions happened before the telephone, before travel, you know, airline travel, where, you know, what was it? You know, electricity was discovered in 2 different parts of the world at right around the same time. You know, so I do think that our human species has the ability to receive these downloads, and sometimes the download gets accepted and somebody answers the phone, and sometimes it doesn't, and then sometimes 2 people do at different points of the world. And, you know, I think that, again, what I love about this encounter show and the fact that paranormal is becoming more normalized, what I love about that is the expansion of our brains and our beingness and our awareness. Like, there's more than meets the eye. And
yeah. I'm trying to think if I have any more questions. I haven't seen one in a while pop up, but it was a cool show. I watched the whole series. You should. There's 4 episodes. They're all really interesting. I was chuckling when you were talking about book reviews, because I remember once at the BPI saying, somehow we were talking about a book, and you were like, oh, that's good. I'm like, oh, you read it. And you're like, no, but I read it. And I was like, really, dude? What? Like, that was like, I came home and I was like, for a while I had this whole bit with my husband of like, you're never going to believe what Miwa said at work today. But that kills me that you read the energy of a book versus actually reading it.
Right? Yeah. Like, this is a good book. I have not read the words.
Yeah.
The energy is pretty amazing.
I'm going to read it with my eyes. Yeah.
Right? I didn't read it with my physical eye, but my third eye is definitely attracted to it.
Yeah.
This book is, you know, pretty good, but it's pretty dry. If you want like intellectual facts about John Mack, that's the one to read.
He's an interesting guy. I mean, he's a pretty interesting character. I definitely want to read more up on him and
I was
On
touched
John
by
Mack.
him, how he, treated the kids with dignity and respect, and that was sweet.
Yeah, when I speak to people who knew him and family members, they all say that he had this amazing ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the universe when he was talking to you. He could just totally like zoom in and just focus on you and just made you feel like you were the only one important around for miles. And so that was definitely his gift. And yeah, and he wasn't willing to lay down to Harvard and them wanting to take away his tenureship. He hired Roderick McLeish, like this amazing attorney who actually, right before he took on John Mack's case, McLeish actually took down the Catholic Church in New York and a bunch of private schools. And you hear him in the interview in the second episode where he says, well, if I can get 5 16-year-olds to say that they were molested by a priest, that's admissible in court and, is proof, so 60 school children,
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one more question that just popped up before we get the boot here. Do you think it's a good idea for people to be reaching out to aliens? Or do you think that's a little reckless? You can tell I have my own opinion.
Yeah, let me twist that to the psychic perspective. And, if somebody asks me, do you think it's safe to be reaching out to any alien? I would say, use your discretion. Who are you talking to? You might interview them and get their credentials first.
Oh, I like it.
With regards to the curriculum work here at Boulder Psychic Institute, I teach an advanced curriculum called the Transmedium program, where I teach students how to channel entities. And there's an interview process. Make sure that what you're going to bring into your body is an energy that you want to bring into your body. Just don't bring in Uncle Bob, who is an alcoholic, into your body to wreck it, right? And so I would say with regards to entities, get, conscious to somebody who wants to have an encounter with a physical body alien, then I would say that it's an alien that's going to be kind and that might want to sit down and have, cosmic chat with you.
They're not the boss.
Yeah, like the abduction part, I'm not sure if that's something I would want to experience,
Right. I'll have a conversation. Like, you're over there, I'm here. Maybe like, no.
Yeah.
I'm not going.
Yeah, and that's how I prefer to talk to entities too. It's like I'm over here. Yeah, amazing. And bring you into my home, So I would, and I think it's that way with other human people too, right? Have some discretion and, tune into what's natural. Your body will tell you through its natural mechanisms, especially if that first chakra is spinning nicely. Oh, this person is a safe person to interact with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to interact with this person. This may not be optimal for my body's integrity and my survival.
Well, this was fun. We should watch more shows.
Yeah, well, there's that one on Netflix about the guy who sees with his eyes closed. I was thinking we could do a little review of that one.
Right. I've got all weekend. Oh yeah. Okay, I'll watch that. I'll forget it. So you have to text me. Our next Instagram Live, we're going to talk about ghosty stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes, we're going to talk about all sorts of entities, and that is on the 4th Thursday of this month. So I think it's in 2 weeks. Yeah. And then next Friday, we're starting an Ascended Masters 4-week workshop where you'll meet a different Ascended Master each week, and we'll talk about their gifts and their strengths and how you can work with them and converse with them. So that starts next Friday. Yeah. Fun stuff.
Yeah. And if you're not getting our newsletter, get our newsletter because we keep you tuned. That tells you all the things that we're doing in real time. Cool. This was fun. Sorry for the technology weirdness. Hopefully the recording works out okay. But anyways, I think we're going to say goodbye.
Thank you, Three. Thank you, everyone. If I didn't see your question, I'll kind of go back and respond to them later. So
maybe we'll write a newsletter all the questions. Good idea. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Three.